We got it on? Good. Thank you very much. Very privileged to be here and to participate in one of the crucial steps in the process of making the turn to a climate sustainable world, which we're not in right now. And a lot has been said about California, and I'm very grateful that I'm a part of California and have something to do with it, because California, in fact, has been doing quite a lot. But before I talk about that, I want to just mention your whole, the health of people, health of planet, and our responsibility, climate change, air pollution, and health. It really is all said right here. It's quite remarkable how clear the problem, the solutions are laid out in this document. The same thing is true of the declaration. I looked at those rather carefully, and I have to say that they really capture the very essence of what we're up against and what we need to do. So that's something that I want to make very clear, that you have all the what you need to know, and it's all here, and you've been talking about it. So as I reflected on what to say, I certainly in no way want to minimize what you've already said, what you've already listened to, and what has been promoted. And this particular Pontifical Academy and this meeting, following on the ones that have preceded, I think are profoundly important in coping with the climate change challenge. There are the Conference of the Parties, there are all these meetings around the world, but until the religious sensibility is engaged, until religious leaders from every part of the globe and from every denomination are engaged, we're not going to be able to move aside the huge rock of indifference, complacency, and inertia. So I just want to pay my respects and appreciation for everything you're doing here, for everything that the Pontifical Academy has already put in place and will put in further effort to get things done. And the connection of health to climate change is central, because climate change is an abstraction. Very few people can really grasp it or certainly be moved by it. But the pollution effects, people get that. And people yesterday were asking, why California? You might say, why is China getting so aggressive all of a sudden? It's called pollution. It's called the impact, the experience of the health effects of very serious air pollution. California had perhaps the worst air pollution, which was called smog. And this smog affected people in a very important part of America and California. And that smog then led to the creation of an Air Resources Board during the presidency of Richard Nixon and the governorship of Ronald Reagan. But it was the problem that created the solution. And the pollution in Shanghai and Beijing have created a more heightened and ambitious response on the part of China, different from just a few years ago. So I believe you are right on track with focusing on health, on the diseases, on what air pollution is going to do to people, is doing to people, and then, of course, the element of injustice, that the people who've done the least to cause the injury are the ones that suffer from it the most. It's all laid out here. We know what it is, and going forward, we're going to have to find the pathway to awaken the world to get done what needs to be done. So in this particular document, you lay out really 4 points. One, we got to get to carbon zero. That's it. 2040, 2045, we got to get to zero. That's number one. Number two, we get there in the most expeditious and efficient way by getting at short-lived climate pollutants. That's said in this document. We do that we'll have a few more years to get at zero carbon. And then thirdly, after we get to zero, which hopefully comes sooner rather than later, then we have to extract a tremendous amount of carbon from the environment itself. So quite a big job. And we're not going to get there with just science and technology. There is no technical fix adequate to the challenge we face. And that's why in your declaration you get to transformation. Now, transformation is the most important, but the most difficult. I know about the idea of transformation because I entered the Jesuit seminary in a world of 1956, pre-Vatican II. We spoke Latin. We were told we're on the path of perfection. We meditated. We underwent self-discipline. We mortified ourselves. We tried real hard. And I can tell you, I did not achieve perfection. I was not transformed. In fact, some of my bad habits, which I will not reveal, are the same today as they were when I entered the Jesuit seminary when Pius XII was Pope. So it's a word easy to use, but transformation, it's in some ways not in our hands. It is really, the image that comes to my mind is Saul of Tarsus riding to Damascus and being thrown off the horse. A lot of powerful people have to get thrown off their horse of affluence, their horse of power, their horse of inertia. So we do need an illumination. Taking a slightly different metaphor, we could use a 12-step program because we're not going to get it by our self-will by any means. There is a power greater than ourselves, and in understanding that and in orienting ourselves to the greater power, we will find the power to get done what we need to do. And so much of this is technical fixes, and I'll mention a few of those. Those are what California is doing. But the big fix is really not a fix, it's a transformation. It's a reorientation. And that, I think, is best captured, or the context of that transformation is best captured in the words of Pope Francis that are put right on the early pages of this document. And I want to quote just the short words: seeing the mysteries, the mysterious network of relations between things. Seeing the mysterious network of relations between things. So the network of things, the connection, the connectivity. If I were to, since I'm in the Vatican here, I could mention the term mystical body. The mystical body of Christ, everyone is part of the body. Wherever you are and whoever you are, it's a connectivity. The biosphere is connected. There is not a separation. We can never be separated from. We are always connected to. We're part. And so our whole individualistic assumptions that we're going to conquer nature, we're going to become the greatest power on earth, we're going to become the greatest church, the greatest university, the greatest politician, that all has a kind of binary framework where one can conquer the other. Yet nature, the mysterious network of connections, is that we're all connected together, and our very being is embedded and dependent on the beings of others and the interactions that sustain life, that constitute life. And it's that interruption, that invasion by industrial technology and by the power of modern mankind, humankind, that is creating the problem. And so we solve one problem and we create another one, unless we can have an understanding about our relationship to nature or creation. How are we going to do that? And we're in a cost-benefit world, cost-benefit. And we hear evidence-based, and we hear data. That's not going to solve. Now, we don't want non-evidence-based. We don't want superstition. We don't want ignorance. But we can't rely on data and evidence. Ultimately, it gets down to something like belief or faith, And in that respect, I think the terms that I got when I went over to Japan to practice Zen meditation, after 8 years of governor, you need a period of meditation on all your sins and omissions. So I did that in Japan, 1986. But in the approach to Zen practice, there are three concepts. Often, I'm sure there are lots of concepts, but three ideas that we talked about. One is great doubt. The other is great faith, and then great commitment. If you want to be enlightened, you need great doubt, you need great faith, and you need great commitment. If we're going to get the job done, we have to have great doubt. Doubt about what we're doing, what's working, where we are, to stand aside, to stand back and see where we are. But doubt is not enough. We need faith. Faith to move forward. Faith to take action based on insufficient evidence. And then thirdly, faith is, at least in the Catholic tradition, is useless without works. And you have to have commitment. You have to do things. So it's that three-part approach that we have to, it's true of all of life, but it's true of this particular campaign. So we first have to see what it is. And it's not a technical fix. It's a transformation of the relationship of human beings to all the mysterious network of things. But let me say something just concretely, because it's not only this larger idea of our place in the world and in creation, but also concrete steps. And in California, we've done 7 things that are replicatable and could be used throughout the world. Number one, we have a mandate and a clear commitment to introduce zero-emission automobiles. And transportation is 50% of our greenhouse, 40 to 50%, depending on how you measure it, of our greenhouse gases. Not only do we have a commitment to electric vehicles, zero-emission vehicles, but also reducing the emissions of fossil fuels, fossil fuel cars. And in that respect, the car companies and the federal government are all mounting the pressure for California to change the regime that we have and the standards that are in place going forward. But we will resist that. We'll resist that politically, and we'll resist it in the courts. Next, as part of this transportation issue, we also have to deal with land use and how people live together, and then our whole relationship to things, to packaging, to moving stuff around, to self-reliance, and how much we make at home and how much we bring in from abroad. All that's tied in. And in that respect, by the way, we have a big challenge here. I was in Vladivostok recently for the East Asian Economic Conference, and we heard wonderful speeches by the president of Russia, the president of South Korea, the prime minister of Japan and Mongolia, and they talked about trade and building pipelines and bridges and all sorts of things. Not one word mentioned about climate change. And yet to talk of trade and not talk about the carbon impacts misses the vital ingredient. But it indicates to me that at the highest circles, people still don't get it. At least they don't get it at the level that we have to get it if we're really going to change. So it's not just a light rinse, but we need a total, I might say, brainwashing. We need to wash our brains out and see a very different kind of world. So that first thing in California, electric vehicles, zero-emission vehicles. Number two, energy efficiency. Our buildings, appliance standards. We are doing that. We have the tightest rules in the United States, I'd say probably in the Western Hemisphere. And that can be done. That's just making better buildings. There's a problem, of course, costs money. It's complicated. Our building code, which was relatively short in length, is now very, very long. So there's no, it's not a free good here. Everything we do has a price and requires tremendous overcoming of inertia. Number three, we have a low-carbon fuel standard. Low-carbon fuel standard. It's one the oil companies have defeated in Oregon and Washington. Well, actually, Oregon has the beginnings of one, but Washington is trying to get one, and they fight it. They fight it in California. So far, we have it. But we're not in the kind of a nicey-nice relationship here. This is real combat, and to maintain any real standard that bites is going to have opposition, and we certainly have that. Then we have our cap and trade, which Kevin DeLeon spoke about yesterday, a cap and trade system that we recently renewed. It was begun by Schwarzenegger and the Democratic legislature. It's been continued more recently. But that, of course, was quite a struggle. Most of these things I'm talking about have been resisted. And number four, we have a renewable portfolio standard. We're now at 27% renewable electricity. San Diego Electric Company is at 40%. I can remember just a few years ago, the private utilities, and the public ones as well, said they could not get to 20% renewable electricity by 2020. They're going to be at well over 30%. So there has been a change, so we're making it. And by the way, the utilities, from being major opponents of what I'm talking about, are now major cheerleaders. And they are very much engaged in expanding the electrification of the California economy. And in fact, there is now a competition between electricity and oil, between the conventional vehicle and the zero-emission vehicle, and the role of utilities, charging stations, and other businesses that makes it all possible. Then finally, the short-term pollutants, that the methane, the chlorofluorocarbons, the others that can get more rapid reduction in carbon emissions. All that's very important. The seventh point is California, with Baden-Württemberg, has started the Under Two Coalition. And when we started that thing, it was just two places. I didn't even know where Baden-Württemberg was. And we met them at a conference, and I can't even remember who first broached the idea, but there it was, and we had an Under Two MOU. Keep the climate, keep the global warming under 2 degrees centigrade. And all of it, then it built. And now we have over 187 states and regions, Ontario, Quebec, Washington, New York, regions in China, South America, Europe. It's quite an incredible power. And we're going to be at the Conference of the Parties, under the subnational groups. So even though President Trump has said climate change is a hoax, and it's not just a hoax, it's a Chinese hoax. So it's a lie within a lie. It reminds me of what Churchill said about the Soviet Union. He said it's a conundrum within a conundrum. So I guess we've got a deception within the deception. Anyway, we'll be at the Conference of the Parties. When I say we, the subnational jurisdictions. And the 187 states and provinces represent over 1 billion people on this planet. It represents almost a third of the GDP, the gross domestic product, the economic wherewithal of the country. So there's a lot going here. And so America is very much in line with the Paris goals. The American people are cities, corporations, nonprofits, universities. The American people are never its government alone. America is, we don't talk about a state. And people even talk about the government as being somewhat distant. But I can tell you the people in the majority are very much in support of serious climate action in following the Paris Accords. And we're going to get there. Just in the last 24 hours, as was mentioned last night, the federal government put out the report, according to law, which laid out very clearly the human causation connected to global warming, and all the dangers that's causing. So even the federal government, you can be at the top, and someone who's been around government, you don't control whole of the government. This is not just a top-down structure that we have in the United States. There are many elements in the federal government. There are laws. We are a country of laws, not just of men. And we have states. We have cities. We have a very vibrant private sector. We have a vibrant civil society. So in that sense, America was at Paris, is at the Conference of the Parties, and will each year increase its participation. So in many respects, if you try to measure what has been President Trump's positive or contribution, I would have to say that his beginning or his attempted withdrawal from Paris actually has put the matter much more in the forefront of the American people. It is now more salient because of the contrast between what he's saying, what the laws of America provide, what other states are doing. So I would say over time, given the commitments that we're seeing in this room today and what we're seeing around the world, the Trump factor is very small indeed in comparison. But that's nothing to cheer about, because if it was only Trump that was our problem, we'd have it solved. But that's not our only problem. The problem, as Pogo said, is us. It's our whole way of life. It's our comfort. It's the way. It's the greed. It's the indulgence. It's the pattern. It is the inertia. And that's why the transformative solutions have to be right alongside of and informing all the technical points and the political agreements that we make. So let me just conclude by saying there's nothing more important than mobilizing the religious and theological spirit. But even more important than that is the prophetic spirit. It wasn't the Pope who did the work of St. Francis. In fact, I recall being at the Vatican when Mother Teresa opened up one of her homes here, right in the Vatican. And all the important people, the Italian politicians, were right there in the plaza. And the Pope walked by, and nobody was really paying much attention to him. This little woman in blue and white walked by, and all eyes were on Mother Teresa. So the power here is prophecy. The power here is faith. And that's what this organization is supposed to be about. And so let's be about it and combine with the technical, the scientific, the political, but never let us forget that it is a challenge of transformation, and transformation in the profoundest way possible. Thank you.